All right. So thank you very much for joining us, Coach. We have not met, but I've had the privilege of, following you and reading some of the stuff that you've put out. For those of you that don't know who you are, could you just briefly introduce yourself and, where you're at right now in your career thus far?
My name's Rusty Whitt. I'm the head strength coach for the football program here at Troy University. We're in the Sun Belt Conference, and we are currently in spring football. But we have a 3 day a week mindset of an off season kind of philosophy while we're doing spring football, and we are getting our players used to lifting heavy in the football environment, so that we also train heavy in season. So that's where I'm at. And my most recent stop prior to here was Army West Point and Texas Tech before that. But we only have an hour or so, so my entire lineage might take a while.
Yeah, no. So for those that don't know, um, you were before you were there, you were also a special forces sergeant in the U.S. Army. You served from 2003 to 2009. In Operation Iraqi Freedom, and you were at Louisiana, Rice, Sam Houston State. So you've kind of been all over the place. What was it like for you being a former Special Forces sergeant working at Army? Like you said, it was for one season, but what was that like?
That was an incredible experience. I was a strength coach for 9 years before I joined the Army, so I had a pretty good perspective training and conditioning before I went in the military. And then while I was in it, it was interesting because all of the cadre instructors that we had the same kind of teaching model that I did while I was a coach. And having that experience and going to West Point, which in order to get into West Point, you can't just be a good football player. Now their recruiting has gotten a lot better. Their players are excellent. Their players are getting recruited by a lot of schools, and like North Carolina State or Virginia, or some competitive programs. So they're getting very good players who are also exceptional students. So their level of focus and attention to detail was pretty remarkable. I've never seen anything like it. I'm trying to get that mindset instilled where I'm at, and I'm not as far off as I thought I would be, but they're just remarkable, self-driven players up there. The hardest thing about working at West Point, I've always joked, was turning on the lights, because there's a lot of light switches for that big weight room, and stocking the refrigerators for all their protein consumption. But I mean, you hand them their workout card, and they were just very, very driven guys. And the coaching staff up there does a remarkable job. They're some of the best strength coaches in the country. So I went up there with an open mind, and I went up there with being pretty humble, because I'd been fired for the first time when I was at Texas Tech. We got let go. Never had happened to me before. So I went up to West Point with an open mind, and being very humble, and learned probably more than they learned from me. So it was just an exceptional experience.
I want to kind of double click on that with the, like you said, being fired for the first time, because some of the coaches out there might have just been in that situation that are listening to this. What was a piece of advice that you would give yourself now, looking back on what had happened in that situation?
Oh man, you know, Coach Adam Email, who's currently with me at Troy, he and I were together at Texas Tech, and I've often thought about what I would do differently, but I went in knowing that Coach Kingsbury had hired me to help change the culture to a more tougher mindset. And I've always believed that in American football, the defense takes on the mindset of the strength conditioning program. So when I got to Texas Tech, their defense was ranked in the 120 something ranking. They were very, very low. And we went from there to around 70th to around 40th over the course of 3 seasons. And our our mindset, our work ethic I would say pretty exceptional. We produced a lot of solid players. You may have heard of a guy named Patrick Mahomes, and he's pretty salty. And he was a product of the work ethic that we were instilling. And I'm not going to take any credit for for Patrick Mahomes, but I mean, we worked hard, and we had a very, if we could have, we were there. We got up earlier than any team I've ever seen. Coach Kingsbury, I'm sure he still does it, but he's at work around 3:30 in the morning. I mean, we were
Wow.
grinding and making improvements. But as far as if I were to give anybody advice, I would probably talk about just continuing to build relationships with players and not be so much as my way or the highway, but make players really understand the whys. Um, Today's athletes are different from when I played college football. Now it's a lot of what's in it for me kind of mindset. There's a lot more focus on the me instead of the we. Um, and maybe my approach at the time was dated. I could make that argument, but at the same time, a lot of coaches are trying to get that to come back into their programs, as far as the quote unquote old school, you know, accountability type mindset. But we brought in, I had some excellent coaches. Coach Scott Sawwasser, who's one of the best speed development coaches in the country, and he was there. And I delegated authority. I thought I did a lot of things right. In hindsight, it's always 2020, but it's a brutal business, man. And there's some really good coaches out there, looking for work who've been let go. And I can't even mention all the names of coaches who have national championship rings who have been let go. It's just sometimes a new coach wants a guy that he's very familiar with. So I'm not going to beat myself up about it, but yeah, it's
You
it's
know,
just a tough business.
yeah, it is. And you alluded to the mindset of toughness, and um, for those that haven't read it, you wrote a well-written article, in my opinion, about 2020. You wrote it called "Your Players Are Not Navy SEALs." And before I start going through, because I have some notes on it, what was the thing that prompted you to write that article, being somebody who literally was, a service member yourself and a strength coach?
There was an incident. I'm not going to give the location, but there was an incident where a football player in high school was killed doing log PT, and he had a log over his head, and it happened a few years ago. And it actually just, they were doing a log PT session trying to duplicate some of the stress inducement of the Navy SEAL, Army Green Beret, Army Ranger type training, and the damn log fell on the kid, and it caused fatal injuries. So that and some of the workouts that I've seen coaches implement as soon as they return back from Christmas holidays, a lot of the new coaches coming in are absorbing athletes who did not go to a bowl game. So they're off. These players have been off for 5 or 6 weeks, sometimes even more, and they just throw them immediately into the fire with this intensity, this new sheriff in town intensity, and most players just are not ready for that. And then you have sickle cell issues. You have, you know, I mean, all kinds of things happening with overuse, heart incidents, and so anyway, I some things I've been talking to think about and thinking about in the past. So I wrote that article, and it was very well received. And I still believe in basically every principle. You have most of the time, if you fight for it, you have about a 7.5 week off season in January starting out, and there's no reason why you can't use the first couple of weeks to basically get athletes ready for the volume that's upcoming. And it doesn't have to come in week one. You can install the kind of mindset and accountability that you're looking for with the new staff without just straight stress exposure to the point where athletes fall out on you. So that was kind of the main motive behind it.
Have you those four big points that you talk about in the article, are those things that you still continue and talk about with your athletes or the coaches? Humans are more important than hardware. Number two, being quality is better than quantity. Number three, special operations forces can't be mass produced. And then number four, competent special operation forces cannot be created after emergencies occur.
Yeah, that last point is kind of what I'm talking about specifically, is that the emergency is that the program is on the ropes. The new coaching staff has come in to revive a situation, and with that kind of situation, you might have a impetus to run a lot of players off or to draw a line in the sand, and that's when some problems can arise. Um, the mass produced thing is the as far as mass producing athletes, it takes time, and that would be my message to athletic directors is if you're seeking a cultural change, you cannot do that in 1 year, perhaps even, it takes a while, because whenever I step into a new coaching situation, I am absorbing athletes 2, 3, or 4 years into that program who've been greatly influenced by the previous staff, their living habits, their work habits. So sometimes those athletes have to matriculate along before anything I say or do or influence can have any impact whatsoever. So it's kind of I wish, and a lot of coaches think this, that everybody would just tap the brakes for a second and realize, hey, you let a bunch of coaches go, you're bringing in all these new people, and before they can even unpack their boxes, we're already talking about, oh, we're not good enough yet or whatever. It takes time to implement and install a new culture and work ethic and work habits with young men who are 18 years old, who are already basically set in many of their ways. So there needs to be some patience and some sanity brought back to the business. You're looking at these coaches who are getting let go after 2 years, and I just don't think it's fair in giving them enough time to get their program settled. So especially when you have so many athletes, over half your roster, who are still influenced by the previous staff. So
And
Your
yeah,
I know
perspective,
it.
all those points I live and die by, and I stand my ground on all of those.
I know it may vary in sport and level of sport itself, but like you were saying, it resonates. I've seen so many teams turn around in like 3 years. They say the first year you're sort of inheriting the team from, like you said, from the previous staff, and there's a lot of observing and understanding hierarchies and dynamics rather than just coming in and kicking down the door. And then the second year is when you propose stuff, and then by the third year, hopefully, if results allow, then you have the team you want, and then you can sort of continue from there. And the fourth year are the tough questions, where you just go structure. It's just not the team. You just go beyond like the admin, and this goes beyond our current possibilities, right?
Well, yeah, and I think by the fourth year you have to start seeing that the recruiting aspect is, especially in college football, and basically all college sports in general, has the quality of your recruits, gotten better, and do you have those key players in point to actually win? But yeah, the four, used to a coach would get 4 years. You look at some of the greatest football coaches of all time, like Barry Switzer, for instance. Look at the beginning of his first 4 or 5 years. It wasn't like a straight trajectory, straight up and down. It was a gradual improvement that he was making. And by the time he had, there for 5 or 6 years, and he had his recruiting network established. Some places that I've been in the past, so I don't want to get too specific, but I mean, a coach gets a raise and he leaves his recruiting area after he's only been there for 2 years, and he leaves, and then you bring in a new coach who's trying to, get to know the high school coaches in the area, and doesn't even know their names, but he's only been there for 1 semester, and then the entire staff goes. So, you have to, especially in the college football setting, you have to have coaches who go and visit high school coaches and establish relationships and establish trust. And for that high school coach who has great influence on his players, on the decisions that they make, do they actually have time to get relationships built in the recruiting process? So it's just very frantic these days, and I'm not going to complain about it. I'd much rather do this than sell insurance, but
In your
it's it's just a frantic deal.
in your opinion, do you think these longer term deals for coaches are going to eventually be beneficial for strength and conditioning coaches, where you're not inheriting that roster, where there is the changeover and there is more continuity, so that way the training can be more mainstream from year to year?
Well, I sure hope so. But then again, if these coaches aren't successful in the first 2 years, they just get bought out. I think a lot of these contracts exist to show on paper that, hey, we got this guy signed for the next 5 years or 7 years, but that is just a recruiting ploy, to establish confidence in the system. I think there has to be, um, yeah, that 3 or 4 years. How many times in my career have I got to see an entire recruiting class show up from their freshman year to their senior year, and enjoy the fruitions of a constant, uh, steady, consistent training program with the same philosophies. And I've been coaching for over 24 years or so. And the answer is twice. Two institutions that I've been to have I been at long enough to see an entire freshman class reach seniors and move on. So, some of your great programs, have had that continuity, and that's why they're great programs. And look at some of the like LSU. They had a good run at it for several years, and they had a strength coach that was there for several years, and Tommy Moffitt, and the results speak for themselves. If you were to name off all the NFL players that Coach Moffitt coached, you'd be here all day. So he was there for a while with solid, very influential programming, and look at the results that he's had. So if you're gonna, I think football coaches, I got to give Coach Sumrall here. I got to have to give him some props, because he didn't know me from Adam, but he did his research on me, and he could have very easily said, "Hey, Coach, I respect you and thanks for everything, but I'm going to go a different direction," which always happens. But he made some phone calls and talked to some people and said, "Hey, we're going to give this guy a chance because of his previous reputation." And man, it's a breath of fresh air, to be able to, hey, I'm entering year three, and now I worked with this guy from his freshman year. Now he's a junior, and he's starting to, he now he can deadlift 750, and he couldn't do 350 2 years ago, and he starts developing, seeing some manhood coming out of these guys. But yeah, I mean, continuity is so important in our profession, and unfortunately, it's not real common these days.
How about with the transfer portal? Because in your the article that you wrote, you came up with a protocol that I think most people would agree with. Returning players perform 75% of the established run test. Junior college transfers 50%. So what are some of the guidelines that you're going about anybody that may be coming in as a transfer from the transfer portal, or if they were
That's
coming
a
from the junior
great
college?
question. That's a great question, because there's so many different training philosophies right now. We inherited several junior college transfers in January, and we do we do something called the Gauntlet, which is based off of what the U.S. Military Academy does in West Point, called their Fourth Quarter Warrior program, and it is the mat room from hell. It's an amazing deal. It's graded, it's filmed, it's like a football game, but they don't do it the very first week. And if they did, half your team would have soft tissue injuries, if not something worse. Um, so the very first 2 weeks, I just anticipate that, even our most established players, I just assume they haven't done anything. They've been tied up with their family, doing things, staying inside, eating a lot, watching bowl games or whatever. So we for the first 2 weeks, we work on a linear speed progression in which we're teaching guys how to run without hurting themselves, and how to reach top end without getting a soft tissue. We do, you know just kind of wall sprints and accelerations, working on mechanics, uh, and we do not do really any anaerobic training. we do a period on Thursday mornings called base athletic movement. And it's the closest thing that we did to anaerobic conditioning for 2 weeks. The base athletic movement is basically a 20-yard box with about 12 lines, about 5 guys deep. We had an offensive box and a defensive box. And we basically threw at them every athletic movement you're ever going to experience if you played soccer, basketball, football, lateral shuffling, backward shuffling, um, backpedaling, turning and running to your right, to your left, 45-degree angles, and just various angles, directional changes, and they get adequate rest. They get about a minute and a half between every repetition, but we're just exposing them to all the things that normally hurt players when they hurt a groin or hurt a hamstring. So the base athletic movement to me is a big part of the conditioning aspect. I'll just say the term preconditioning before we amp it up with the we call it the Trojan Gauntlet, which is like the fourth quarter warrior program. And then we did the Trojan Gauntlet on Wednesdays and Fridays, and that was our primary anaerobic conditioning session. And on Mondays we would do linear speed and start amping up the distance. Whereas on week one we're doing 10-yard sprints, and they cannot get the velocity up in 10 yards to really hurt themselves. We progress all the way up to 40 yards by week 8, and then they're understanding how to break correctly and not hurt themselves. But I would say the intensity starts out low, gets high, and then as spring ball approaches, we taper them back off. And we didn't have anybody get hurt, so I think it works to have that kind of model.
Have been some of the things that you incorporated in terms of your standards that you use to, instill that mindset, urgency, not only in year one when you got there, but as you said, with all the junior college transfers and almost having to, every year is a new year because it's a new team. But what have been some of those things that you have done to continue to instill that toughness mindset that you say, you don't need to do, the Navy SEAL?
Yeah, well, on Mondays, our team run is at 6 a.m., but Coach Summerall brought in a 10-minute early policy. So at 5:50 in the morning, everybody is dressed exactly the same socks, same shoes, same girdle, shorts, t-shirt, and they're standing in line waiting on me. And we do a model of flex, a daily flex that's based upon Moses Cabrera from the New England Patriots. And it's 3 guys every 5 yards. We use the entire football field. So there's 3 guys in each line. And our mobility session takes 7 minutes long. And once it starts, you don't stop until you're done, and you go to the hash and back. And it's a dynamic flexibility movement. And if you can see that, is it backwards or can you even read that?
Yeah, we got that.
Yeah, we can read that.
Yep.
And that's it right there. It's and walking hip to ham, which is a walking hip opener, walking toe kick, and they're down and back, and they're constantly moving, and it's really hard to carry on a conversation because they're busy doing the flex period right. Quad walk, walking quad to heel hug, down and back, lateral crossover with a hop. They're getting a groin. They're lean to the right, lean to the left, crossover, do the same thing, and lateral low shuffle on the way back. Forward over hurdle, skipping, backward over hurdle, skipping. So they're opening up their adductors, closing their adductors. Forward rhythm skip, backward rhythm skip, down and back. Then we stop it, and then we did everything is on the whistle, snap karaoke, and it has to be an explosive, like a track warm up, snap karaoke, down and back. A skip down, a run back on the whistle, high heel backward hamstring run down, and then the 4 hard steps to complete it. And it's 7 minutes nonstop. And if an athlete is short on discipline, because everything involves 3 steps, 1, 2, 3, lunge, 1, 2, 3, kick. Everything is based on every 3rd step. So if they can't do the flex period right, we start it over again. And I'll say, hey, Jeff didn't take the required amount of steps. We got to do it this way, and we're going to start flex over again. And so the flex period gets your heart rate up pretty high. Our linemen hate doing it, especially twice. So we do, our little mantra is you're going to do it right or you're going to do it again. And so just the quality of work, the emphasis on quality of work is kind of where we start with our mental toughness, doing the littlest things right. And then it bleeds into the weight room with our warm up. We're going to do, Coach Email has a very solid warm up that we do utilizing mini bands, uh, activate your glutes and get guys ready to squat. And if guys aren't doing that right, we'll start it over again. And then we squat to a standard of top of quad parallel, breathing and bracing. If a guy doesn't breathe and brace correctly, we'll start that set over again. So there's not a whole lot of punitive aspects. It's just doing it over again until they get it right. So you keep doing that over and over again, and guys learn, hey, our work quality is going to be solid. And to me, that's a founding principle of having mental toughness.
And it seems like, kids, they may seem like they hate it at first, but, typically they're yearning for that and they want that structure. And, how many of those kids have you been able to then champion to try to, hey, look, so-and-so this way, and pushing them to be out in front. So that way it's peer led, rather than you guys. Have you ever had somebody say?
That's another excellent question, because when we completed when we completed the gauntlet, and I told the guys we have 14 attempts on the gauntlet, and yeah, I'm sorry, 12 attempts on the gauntlet. And if you get 2 of them right in the required time frame, we're going to stop and we're going to do peer led conditioning. So during the summertime, we're going to do peer led conditioning, and all I do is I call down 4 of our players, and they're not necessarily your common team leader guys. Some of them are the guys who need to be improving their leadership skills. And I will print out the workout of the day. I hand it to them. I give them 4 whistles, 4 stopwatches, and here are the instructions. And you're going to lead the run. And myself and my staff are going to sit in the stands and grade you as if we're football fans. And it's simple. It's 5 half gassers, 15-second skill, 17-second big skill, 19-second lineman. It's across the football field and back. And we have offense will go first. We flip a coin. Whoever wins can choose. We're going to go first or not. The defense may stand on the 50-yard line and watch the offense go. So it might be 5 half gassers. If they make all their times, they touch the line the correct way, and they don't have any repeats, then defense comes up. They have their 5 half gassers. And then we may do various forms of the gasser, near hash and back, far hash and back. And we have all these different gassers, mini gassers, sprint gassers, pursuit gassers, and they're all basically 100 yards long, broken up into short durations, hash and back, or whatever it might be, 2 directional changes or 3 directional changes. And we grade everything: time, correct foot touching the line. If they did not finish, it's a miss. And so we just sit up there quietly and watch them conduct the entire run, which takes about 45 minutes. And then we walk down and we say, hey, defense missed this many reps on this. They didn't, we had a wrong hand touch. We had a guy jump on rep 3. And then we do all the repetitions. We messed up over again. So it's a peer led run, and those guys take a lot of pride in doing it right. So that's something I've developed late in my career. It's not about me or the video of me out front tooting a whistle, looking like the cool guy. It's the work quality of the players and developing leadership traits in them. So that's a heavy part of our summer conditioning, is the peer led, team led anaerobic day.
How familiar are you with the H2F movement that is occurring in the Army in terms of their hiring of sometimes collegiate strength coaches leaving the field, or you know, whether it be a high school coach, but people leaving the collegiate world or the private world and going into the Army in a similar capacity to train their soldiers. The program.
Holistic health and fitness developer, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I've looked at that with great interest. Coaches that want to have a normal 9 to 5 lifestyle and be off on the weekends, it's a good option for them. I think it's fantastic. I wish we'd have had that when I was. The facilities that they're building now are fantastic as well. The one that Sornex put together at Fort Benning is pretty amazing, and I know Ranger Battalion in Georgia has a nice facility. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic career option. Um, the only problem with that for me is there's not a game day. You're not training specifically for a certain Saturday against a certain opponent. Um, and but I think the level of coaches that I'm seeing out there is pretty awesome. I've gone to some clinics and listened to guys speak, and they're very responsible and very thoughtful about what they're doing. And their target audience is, of course, different than a typical collegiate athlete. It's more of a daily body maintenance and health, and it's a good name for it, the holistic approach. So I think it's fantastic. I've I've talked to some guys about it, and I did ask a group. I was on a Zoom call in 2020 with about a dozen of them one time because I got invited to speak, and I asked how many of you guys had been on a combat deployment and seen what you're actually training the guys for, or the guys and the girls for, and nobody raised their hands. I was like, well, what's if you're going to train them for a year-long deployment, you need to be over there. And I guess it's an insurance thing or something, but
Yeah, that was my question, because like you said, there's no game day. So you know, for you and your training and what we do, we work backwards from games and practices.
yeah.
How are they reverse engineering and working backwards from the needs of what these people are going to be doing on their deployments?
Well, they're going by the recommendations from the sergeants majors and the guys who've been doing it for a long time. I think there's a lot of leaning on the non-commissioned officers who usually done the most deployments. I mean, I have friends in 10th Special Forces Group who've spent 10 years of their life in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and it's incredible the amount of sacrifice these servicemen have put forth for their job and their country. But the wear and tear on their bodies is extreme. So I've often looked at with great interest on how they're actually training these guys who already have overuse injuries from selection and just from the wear and tear of fast roping and doing and jumping, doing halo jumps, and the weight that you carry with body armor. That in itself, just a typical work day of training is taking a toll on them as well. I think there's definitely some coaches out there who have a very smart approach on that and how much volume that they're doing. I think it started out with there was a big push in the early 2000s in my area with guys doing CrossFit. Well, you're overtraining to train for something that you're already basically overtraining to do, and so I think that has been pushed out a little bit with just the repetition still failure mindset, and there's been more intelligence behind the programming. But I do know that a 10 or 12-month deployment is the psychological stress, the lack of sleep, the lack of proper diet. That is really hard to prepare for. And the stronger that you are, the stronger that you are, the better you're going to handle it. So in my mind, it would be very similar to how I would train a football team without the running volume. It would just be basic movements and getting their joints strong, and you're going to have some service members who can't squat, their backs are messed up or have neck problems, but there's ways to work around that, get a belt squat on them. But I think that just the basic development of strength is a huge component to that movement. But um, I haven't spoken to anybody in that field in about a year and a half now. And I know it's continuing to morph a whole lot. They're using catapult tracking systems. Special Forces Selection has been doing that for about 10 years, putting GPS trackers on their candidates. And I know that their nutrition programs have been getting better. So I think it's a pretty exciting movement.
Yeah, and we have, on Strength Coach Network, we have a fair amount of members in the, the military side doing the H2F. And so there's going to be people that are going to take a lot from this. What would you mentioned the sleep and mentioned the nutrition part. What would be, two of the things that you kind of could say, hey, this is what you should really try to focus on or dial in for those people you're working with?
Well, I would say that the most stressful times that I had on a deployment was doing a react to contact and then a break from contact, carrying 240 pounds of equipment. And I was 240 pounds myself. So do the math on that, 500 pounds of, you're having to move 500 pounds. So you better be strong to be able to do that. And I would definitely stress the importance of moving heavy loads the correct way, and if implementing their typical everyday gear in your workouts. Uh, my team sergeant at TENS Group allowed me to formulate our conditioning program, and I told I had 12 guys on my team. I said, hey, we're going to meet at the intramural fields. Bring your body armor and your ruck. And we had fallen comrade drills where guys are completely dead weight wearing their kit. So you have a 200-pound man wearing 50-pound kit. So you're having to drag him 50 yards and then try to pick him up and carry him 50 yards. The idea was, hey, we're going to drag this guy to cover and then pick him up and try to get him to a helicopter. That was the story. And not very many guys were able to pick up a dead weight that weighed 250 pounds. So how are we going to do that, without exposing ourselves or compromising everybody? So, hey, take the body armor off, get the guy on your shoulders. Who's going to carry his equipment? And so we had SOPs based around, who's carrying what and how we're going to break it down and who's going to carry the weapon if the guy can't carry his own. So we got very specific with the most stressful situation you could fall under, which would be wounded comrades, under fire. So I'm sure that they do that level of specified stress induced training, but that's what I would really harp on, because uh, you want to train for the worst, and the worst is you're going to be, without water. Like we were in a 7-hour sustained gunfight, and we all ran out of water, and we're on our last couple of mags of ammunition, and we're like, well, if we run out of ammo, what are we going to do? We can't throw rocks at them, so we better go this way. And so we practiced that mindset, and our team sergeant was very receptive to it. Also, he was greatly influenced. My team sergeant was influenced by the situation called Black Hawk Down in Somalia in 1993, and looking at kind of the worst situation imaginable and how will we react if that happens to us. So his idea was, you're going to carry more ammunition and you're going to carry more water. Well, it weighs more, but at the worst case scenario, you're at least prepared for that, and you're prepared to carry it.
As you're, now keeping that mindset with the football team, how are you preparing them for the worst case scenario in terms of football, and how you're preparing them physically, but also working that nutrition, working the sleep piece, working the holistic health for your football athletes?
Great question. So our very first game of the year is against Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is a greatly improved football team in the SEC, and they're giving programs like Georgia and Alabama a run for their money, and they have one of the highest paid coaching staffs, the most demanding coaching staff in the country right now. So we're going to go to Oxford, Mississippi, and there's going to be about 85 or 90,000 people there, and every one of them is going to want to see us fail. And they all want to see us. They don't care if we get injured or not. You know, if we get injured, they're going to enjoy their cold beverage and laugh and talk and eat popcorn while they're trucking our guys off the field. So uh, I'm getting our guys as resilient as I possibly can. We're lifting with intelligence. We're lifting as heavy as we can. Our power movements, getting their technique as solid as we can in our power cleans. You know, we power clean to produce force and to absorb force. And the more force that you can pull and catch, the better. So we're working a lot on that. And just in our running program is very well designed for the short stops and starts of football and the short amount of rest of a team that wants to come out and snap the ball every 15 seconds. So I think the greatest, if you look at college football or from a 50,000 foot satellite view, the first thing you're going to notice is a team are they fatigued? Are your guys able to come off the ball or not? So we put a big premium on our agility days and anaerobic conditioning days during the summertime. Not as, you know, the winter program is different. We put more emphasis on getting fast and getting big in the off season, and then we fine tune that in the summer. So I call it not letting the wheels fall off. As far as the worst case scenario, if you ever watch the football team just get dismantled on national television, and that's usually because they get overwhelmed physically and they get tired. So we're going to work on all those aspects and build resilience and build a lot of self-confidence, because when guys accomplish challenging workouts and they get stronger and they get more lean body mass, they get a lot of self-confidence, and it's hard to beat a confident team.
Sounds like a good place to wrap up today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sounds
man.
like a great wrap. So
It was a pleasure, guys. I appreciate the invite. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
that's a great. Thank you very much, Rusty. It was great having you on.
Yeah, fellas. If we're gonna do it again sometime, let me know.
Will do.
All right.
Right.
Have a good one.
Bye. You too.
Bye.
On making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.